Felt a trickle of blood coming from that spot. Good, John taunted. You're a bleeder. I like bleeders. Mark tried to take advantage of John flapping his lips instead of fighting. He stepped in quickly, locking his leg out into a side kick at John's midsection. John's quick reflexes caught the foot and used that as a lever to tip Mark back onto his behind. Mark jumped up quickly. That karate shit ain't gonna cut it today, John said as he closed the gap. His hands became blurs as he pummeled the karate man with a flurry of head and body shots. Mark was able to deflect most of the headshots by sacrificing his body. To stop the brutal attack, he snapped his knee up, hoping it would collide with John's groin. He missed but was able to use his foot to push the aggressor off him. Mark now knew there was no way he could win using his traditional sparring tactics. He had to find another way. He knew he could take out John's knees, but that would end the fight too quickly, and then Bullseye would shoot him. There had to be a way to stop John that would keep him more or less on his feet. He stepped forward and jabbed at John's face, not to hit him, but so his hand would block John's vision. Mark saw the counterpunch coming and leaned back some to try and lessen the blow. At the same time, he cocked his right leg and sent a round kick to the outside of John's left thigh. As soon as he felt the satisfying thud, he mirrored the action on the other side. John had been throwing punches like a machine gun. Most of them were landing, but Mark was doing his best to ignore the pain. The 2 leg kicks seemed to take a toll. Now the punches weren't coming as fast or as hard as they were before. Mark chambered for another kick and whipped it out. John tried to step out of the way, but in doing so, he put most of his weight on his left leg just as the kick landed 6 inches above his knee. He staggered a little, and Mark could see anger starting to smolder in his eyes. Mark cocked his left leg again, but this time only faked the kick, as John diverted all of his energy toward blocking it. Mark stepped down and in and landed his own barrage of body and head punches. When John's hands came back up to block the hand techniques, Mark sent another devastating roundhouse kick to John's left leg. The leg buckled and John dropped down on one knee. Mark backed off. If the situation weren't so serious, he would have enjoyed the look on John's face. The invader returned to his feet, the anger in his eyes beginning to blaze, and attacked in a straight line. His punches weren't straight and hard like they had been at first. He was attacking with the windmill motion that an untrained fifth grader might use. Mark was ready and kicked his opponent's right leg again. John didn't fall this time, but it staggered him again. The rage was building in him, and Mark was beginning to believe his plan might work. John was initiating the attacks instead of countering them as he'd done at first. With each rush, he'd make some contact, but Mark made sure he received at least one good leg kick in return. Mark could see the fight draining out of the man and figured that with 2 or 3 more good kicks, he would try his plan. He tried to turn John around and put him in a headlock. Then he could worry about Bullseye. His next kick sent John down to his knees again. Mark took a half step back to allow his old neighbor to regain his footing. John stayed on one knee, resting his arms across the other leg, and took several deep breaths. "You've improved too," John admitted to Mark, "but how are you going to stop this?" he said as he leaped up and forward with his hands reaching for Mark's neck. The move surprised Mark, and he felt himself falling backwards. His martial arts training kicked in, and he pulled his chin down to his chest so his head wouldn't hit the floor. John's head smashed into Mark's face and made his head snap back, and he hit the back of his head anyway. Even though the living room was carpeted, the impact was still severe. Mark could feel John's weight on top of him and the Cretan's hands around his throat. He had tunnel vision and knew he was close to unconsciousness. Mark fought it, as he knew if he passed out, he was dead. The blow to his head seemed to keep his arms from working properly. He was trying to push John off of him, but he didn't have the strength to do it. As he felt the life being choked from his body, he began to panic. The faces of those he loved flashed before his eyes, not just the faces of his family, though those were the first he saw, but the faces of his friends and neighbors. This was it for him. He tried his best to build this community, just so the faces he saw would be safe from the fate that was now inevitable. But he had failed. John would take his family. The MZBs would terrorize and destroy Silver Hills. The remorse Mark felt overwhelmed him, and he was sorry, not only for his failing, but that this would be the last emotion he felt before he departed this life. It's the end of the chapter. I'm sorry. Good night. Lights out. Yeah, hold on. Lights out. Good night. Hey, this is Jerry Diamond. If you're listening to this, you are the remnant.